The PET plastic bottle of water sitting in your pantry has a timestamp printed on the shoulder. It might say, "Best by October 2026. You've seen this date 1,000 times and likely interpreted it through the logic of a grocery shopper. Milk spoils, bread molds, meat rots, so water must eventually go bad too. But if you pause to analyze the chemistry of the liquid inside, that date becomes a paradox. Water is an inorganic compound. It's two hydrogen atoms covalently bonded to one oxygen atom. It contains no proteins to denature, no sugars to ferment, and no biological structures to decompose. The water molecules in that bottle have existed for billions of years, cycling through oceans, clouds, and aquifers long before human civilization existed. They didn't expire then, and they won't expire in October of 2026. So, what's the date for? We talked about this in one of our previous videos. When bottled water causes problems, it's almost never because the water itself has gone bad. The date isn't an expiration of the water, it's an expiration of the containment vessel. When you buy a case of water, you're not purchasing a static product. You're purchasing a chemical system in a state of slow, invisible decay. The date stamped on the plastic is an admission by the manufacturer that the engineering of the bottle has a limited lifespan before it begins to merge with the liquid it's supposed to hold. To understand why this happens and why the industry felt compelled to start printing these dates in the first place, we have to look away from the water and focus entirely on the polymer shell that surrounds it. This is a story about the friction between eternal chemistry and temporary packaging, driven by a legislative accident in New Jersey that changed the global supply chain. Most consumers assume that expiration dates on water are the result of rigorous federal safety studies conducted by the FDA. The reality is far more bureaucratic and far less scientific. The practice began in 1987, not in a laboratory, but in the New Jersey state legislature. That year, New Jersey passed a blanket law requiring every single food product sold in the state to carry an expiration date of 2 years or less from the date of manufacture. The law was intended to clear out old inventory of milk and meat, but the legislative language was absolute. It defined food product broadly enough to catch bottled water in its net. This created a logistical nightmare for the beverage industry. Manufacturing plants operate on the principle of standardized flow. They run high-speed lines producing tens of thousands of bottles per hour, identical in every way, destined for distribution centers across the entire continent. A factory in Maine might ship water to Boston, Philadelphia, and Newark. The industry faced a binary choice. They could separate their inventory, creating a special New Jersey-only production line with date stamps while leaving the rest of the country's water undated. Or they could simply stamp a 2-year date on every single bottle produced in North America, regardless of where it was being sold. They chose the path of logistical least resistance. The date stamp became an industry standard, not because the water needed it, but because it was cheaper than segregating the supply chain. Interestingly, New Jersey repealed this law in 2006. The state legislature admitted there was no scientific evidence supporting the expiration of water. But by then, the infrastructure was set in stone. The inkjets were already installed on the bottling lines, and consumer expectation had solidified. We'd been trained to look for a date, so the companies kept printing them. However, while the date started as a bureaucratic fiction, it accidentally aligned with a chemical reality that scientists were just beginning to understand. The water doesn't age, but the plastic does. And as it ages, it changes the chemical composition of the beverage. The standard water bottle is crafted from polyethylene terephthalate, known in the industry as PET or PETE. You see it identified by the number 1 inside the recycling triangle. It's a miracle of materials science, lightweight, shatterproof, and clear. But it's not a glass vial. It's a porous, reactive polymer that interacts with its environment. Unlike polycarbonate plastics, PET water bottles are typically BPA-free. But BPA-free doesn't mean chemically inert. It simply means the risks come from different compounds. The manufacturing process itself introduces the first variable of instability. Bottles don't arrive at the water factory as bottles. They arrive as preforms, small, thick, test tube-shaped pieces of hard plastic. To become a bottle, these preforms are subjected to intense thermal energy. They're heated until soft and then blasted with high-pressure sterile air to stretch them into the mold of the bottle. This process, called stretch blow molding, creates the container, but it also creates chemical byproducts. The heat stress can generate acetaldehyde and formaldehyde, trace compounds that get trapped within the matrix of the plastic wall. Under ideal storage conditions, 70 degrees Fahrenheit in the dark with stable humidity, PET plastic locks these compounds away effectively. The polymer chains remain tight. The prison holds. But the global supply chain is rarely ideal. It's a gauntlet of thermal abuse. Consider the journey of a bottle before it reaches your hand. It leaves the factory and gets loaded onto a semi-truck. In the summer, the unconditioned trailer of that truck can reach internal temperatures of 140 degrees Fahrenheit. It might sit in that heat for 3 days crossing the American Midwest. Then it moves to a distribution warehouse, which may or may not be climate-controlled. Finally, it might sit on a pallet in a loading dock under direct sunlight before being stocked. Heat is the enemy of the polymer matrix. As the temperature of the plastic rises, the molecular chains begin to relax. They don't melt in a way you can see with the naked eye, but on a microscopic level, the structure opens up. This accelerates a process known as migration. Migration is the movement of chemical compounds from the packaging material into the food product. In the case of bottled water, the primary migrant is antimony. Antimony trioxide is a catalyst used in the production of PET plastic. It makes the reaction happen faster and more efficiently, but it doesn't disappear when the bottle is finished. It remains embedded in the plastic. Research conducted at Arizona State University and the University of Florida has mapped the behavior of antimony in heat-stressed bottles. The data is consistent and revealing. At room temperature, antimony migration is negligible. But as the temperature climbs, the timeline compresses. If you store water at 150 degrees, a plausible temperature for a car trunk in Arizona or Texas, antimony levels can exceed EPA safety limits in a matter of weeks, not years. Studies have also detected trace phthalates, plasticizers used across the packaging industry, particularly in bottles exposed to heat over long periods. This is why the expiration date is actually a variable, not a constant. It assumes room temperature storage. If you change the variable of heat, you change the integrity of the bottle. The date serves as a liability buffer for the manufacturer, a way of saying, we guarantee the integrity of this vessel for 2 years, assuming you treat it gently. But chemical migration isn't just about safety thresholds. It's about the sensory experience of the consumer. This brings us to a phenomenon millions of people have experienced, but few understand: the sweet taste of old water. Water should be flavor neutral. If you open a bottle that's been sitting in your garage for a year, or one that's been left in a hot car, you might detect a distinct, fruity, chemically sweet aftertaste. You're not imagining this. You're tasting acetaldehyde. Acetaldehyde is a breakdown product of the PET polymer. It's not generally considered toxic at these levels, but it's highly flavorful. Humans have a low sensory threshold for it. When the plastic degrades due to heat or photooxidation from sunlight, acetaldehyde migrates into the water. When you taste that sweetness, you're tasting the thermal history of the bottle. You're detecting the fact that the container has begun to dissolve, microscopically, into the liquid. You're drinking the degradation of the logistics network. There's a physical dimension to this decay as well, one that recent technology has only just allowed us to see. For decades, we worried about chemicals. Now we're looking at particles. In January 2024, researchers at Columbia University and Rutgers University utilized a new imaging technique called stimulated Raman scattering microscopy. This technology allowed them to look deeper into bottled water than anyone had before. Previous studies counted microplastics. This study counted nanoplastics, particles so small they can pass through the blood-brain barrier. The World Health Organization has acknowledged the presence of micro and nanoplastics in drinking water, while noting that long-term health effects are still not fully understood. The results recalibrated our understanding of the industry. They found roughly 240,000 plastic fragments per liter of bottled water. That's 10 to 100 times more than previous estimates. But the most critical insight from this study wasn't just the number. It was the type of plastic they found. A significant portion of the debris wasn't PET from the bottle body, it was polypropylene and nylon. This points to a mechanical failure in the system that has nothing to do with heat or time. It has to do with friction. The cap of your water bottle is usually crafted from polypropylene. When you crack the seal, that satisfying snap-crackle sound of the safety ring breaking, You're performing a violent mechanical act on a microscopic scale. You're grinding hard plastic against hard plastic. The study suggests that the simple act of opening the bottle shears off microscopic shards of the cap, which fall directly into the water immediately before you drink it. This changes the definition of expiration. The bottle doesn't just degrade over 2 years of storage, it degrades the moment you use it. The cap, designed to keep the water safe, becomes a source of contamination the instant it performs its function. The industry creates an illusion of a sterile, static object. A sealed bottle looks like a time capsule, suspended in animation. But in reality, it's a porous, breathing membrane. This brings us to the environmental interaction of the bottle. We often store water in the places where we store other chemicals: garages, basements, and utility closets. We stack cases of water next to gasoline cans, paint thinners, and cleaning solvents, assuming the plastic protects the liquid. But PET plastic is permeable to gases. It breathes. If you store bottled water next to a can of gasoline fumes for 6 months, the water can absorb the vapor through the walls of the bottle. Even in a clean environment, the bottle interacts with the air. Over long periods, carbon dioxide from the atmosphere can slowly permeate the plastic and dissolve into the water. When CO2 dissolves in water, it forms mild carbonic acid. This explains why an old bottle of water sometimes tastes sour or acidic. The pH has actually dropped. The water hasn't spoiled in the biological sense. There's no bacteria rotting it, but the chemistry has shifted due to the permeability of the container. The liquid has equilibrated with the atmosphere of the warehouse it sat in. The best buy date, therefore, is an attempt to put a boundary on these variables. It's the manufacturer saying, beyond this point, we can no longer predict the migration rates, the gas exchange, or the structural integrity of this polymer. It creates a strange reality where the most enduring substance on Earth, water, is sold in a package that turns it into a perishable good. The water inside the bottle could essentially last forever if stored in glass or stainless steel. It would remain H2O, unchanged for centuries. But by wrapping it in petroleum-derived polymers, we tie the lifespan of the water to the lifespan of the plastic. We've engineered a product that's incompatible with the permanence of its contents. So how should you, as an observer of industrial systems, interpret the date on your bottle? First, view it as a durability rating, not a spoilage warning. If the date has passed, the water won't kill you. But it will taste like the bottle. It'll have higher levels of antimony. It'll have a higher count of micro-debris from the degrading inner wall. Second, recognize that the date assumes a perfect supply chain. If a bottle expires in 2026, but it spent a week in a hot shipping container in July 2024, that expiration date is effectively null and void. The thermal damage is cumulative. The chemical migration that would normally take 2 years can happen in 2 weeks at high temperatures. This creates a new way to look at the water aisle. When you see dust on the shoulders of a bottle, or when you see faded labels from sun exposure in a gas station window, you're looking at accelerated decay. You're seeing a system that has stressed the packaging beyond its design limits. The recent FDA updates and the launch of their Micro and Nanoplastics webpage in August 2024 signal that regulators are beginning to catch up to this reality. They're acknowledging that the container is an active ingredient in the food product. But until the materials change, the dynamic remains the same. The water is eternal. The bottle is temporary. When you drink expired water, you're drinking the evidence of time and physics acting on a temporary material. You're tasting the breakdown of the boundary between the product and the package. The next time you check that date code, remember that you're not checking the freshness of the spring or the purity of the source. You're checking the structural integrity of the plastic cage that holds it. The water doesn't know what year it is. The plastic knows exactly how much time, heat, and friction it has endured, and eventually it shares that history with the liquid inside.